The air in the mansion on Summit Hill was perpetually cold, not from a faulty thermostat, but from the silence that had settled in its heart like a block of ice. Everyone in the city knew the name Arthur Vance. Billionaire, finance titan, a man whose word could move markets and crush enemies. He was rich, powerful, feared, but inside his house, a fortress of glass and steel, he was just a father who had lost his way. Arthur's daughter, Lily, was the heart he could no longer reach. She was 10 years old, a girl whose laughter had been stolen by a terrible accident 2 years ago. An unseen car, a slippery road, and in a moment, the light went out. She was paralyzed from the waist down, a tragedy that left her physically broken and emotionally silent. She didn't cry, she didn't complain. She just existed, strapped into her custom-built wheelchair, her eyes gazing out of the mansion's enormous windows, two pools of infinite sadness. Arthur had spent millions trying to fix her. The best doctors, the most advanced therapy, private tutors, and toys that filled entire rooms. Nothing worked. Nothing brought back the flicker in her eyes. The house was spotless. The gardens were immaculate. But joy had been evicted. Arthur moved through his days like a ghost. Board meetings, signed contracts, the endless clink of success against the window pane. He was a man who solved problems, but this was a problem no amount of money could fix. His guilt was a physical weight, pressing him into the leather of his executive chair. He believed he had failed her, and that belief had hardened his already distant heart. Every afternoon, precisely at 3 o'clock, Arthur's assistant, a woman named Clara, would help Lily into the specially adapted SUV. It was a ritual of pain. They drove to the botanical gardens, a patch of green sanctuary in the chaos of the metropolis. Lily would sit on a small hill, her face turned toward the sun, never moving, never speaking. Arthur would watch from a distance, terrified to approach, terrified to face the consequence of his own absence in her early life. He had tried to hire companions for her, bright, cheerful young women who talked about ponies and pop music. Lily had dismissed them all with a silent tilt of her head. They lasted a maximum of 4 days. Now it was just him and Clara, the dutiful assistant whose kindness was slowly being worn away by the mansion's perpetual gloom. One Tuesday, the usual route to the garden was blocked by an unexpected parade. Clara, flustered, had to take a detour through a part of the city Arthur never saw. It was loud, full of chipped paint and restless noise. As the black SUV slid slowly through the traffic, Lily's head, for the first time in months, turned sharply toward the passenger window. Arthur glanced over, annoyed by the interruption to his scheduled silence. He saw him, a boy. He couldn't have been more than 17. Thin, dressed in clothes that were 2 sizes too large and covered in dust. He stood on a cracked slab of concrete beside a busy intersection, a worn baseball cap on the ground, holding a few crumpled bills. He wasn't begging, not exactly. He was dancing. His body was a blur of motion, a cascade of impossible twists and spins. His movements were raw, pure, and utterly electric. He moved with a furious joy, as if fighting the very pavement beneath his feet, transforming the gray, noisy corner into a stage of pure light. His face was etched with the strain of his life, but his eyes, when they briefly met the windshield of the SUV, were blazing with an inner fire. Kill. That was the boy. Homeless, rootless, invisible to the city's power brokers, but a beacon on this broken street. Lily did not move, but her eyes were fixed on him. Arthur saw the faintest, smallest widening of her pupils, a micro-expression that spoke 1,000 words. It lasted only 2 seconds before Clara navigated the traffic and sped out of the district. Arthur dismissed it immediately. Another street performer, another piece of the city's grime. But that night, as he sat in his opulent study, the image of the boy's impossible energy haunted him. And more unsettlingly, the fraction of life he had seen in his daughter's face. The next day, Arthur didn't mention the boy. But when Clara suggested an alternative route to the gardens, he stopped her. "No," he said, his voice flat. "The usual route. I prefer consistency." He wanted to see the boy again, Not because he cared, but because he was a man obsessed with data, and that micro-expression on Lily's face was an anomaly he needed to understand. They drove the route. The boy was there, Cale, dancing. Lily watched again, just as silently, just as intently. Arthur felt a strange, cold pull in his chest. A sliver of fear mixed with a sliver of hope. What if this street kid, this human contradiction of poverty and joy, held the key to his daughter's recovery? It was an absurd thought, a betrayal of all the sterile scientific solutions he had bought. This went on for 3 days. Every drive, the small, powerful performance. Every time, the spark in Lily's eyes. On the 4th day, Cale saw their car. His intense gaze landed on the luxury SUV, and he saw the beautiful girl strapped into the wheelchair. His movements didn't stop, but something shifted in his expression. A softening, a moment of deep, unspoken recognition. He danced for her, not for the crumpled bills, but for the girl who sat, a quiet statue in the black machine. Arthur couldn't focus that night. He had 5 new contracts, a hostile takeover, and hotel staff problems, but none of it could quiet his thoughts. What was this boy? What kind of fire drove a person with nothing to move like that? Was he a hustler? A distraction? He opened the family's file on Lily's condition. The prognosis was guarded, the emotional recovery stalled. He wanted Lily to be normal again, to be seen. But maybe he had to start by seeing someone else first. By the time the clock hit 1 in the morning, Arthur Vance, a man who never chased anything, had made up his mind. Tomorrow he would follow the boy, not with anger, not with pride, but with a question burning in his chest. Who is this boy who cleans up the city's streets with his impossible dance, but remains unseen? Arthur wasn't used to following people. People followed him. But that Friday evening, after the brief, powerful performance at the corner, Arthur sat behind the wheel of a rented, nondescript gray sedan, a plain cap pulled low and dark sunglasses hiding his eyes. He didn't need a driver. Not tonight. Hands firm on the steering wheel, he waited, his silence saying more than words ever could. Tonight, he would follow the boy himself. From behind the tinted glass, he watched as Cale gathered the few coins and bills from his cap. He didn't count them. He simply stuffed them into a worn denim pocket. The boy didn't hail a cab. He didn't wave down a bike. He walked, street after street. His worn sneakers slapped against the dusty pavement. He turned corners with the ease of someone who had walked this route 100 times. Arthur followed slowly, carefully, always keeping his distance. They passed bright shops, noisy bikers, hawkers shouting at passers-by, and women fanning the smoke of roasted corn. But Cale never looked left or right. He kept walking, his face calm, his pace steady, his eyes fixed ahead. The city was a canvas of chaos, but Cale was a thread of purpose moving through it. The walk was long, close to 5 miles. Arthur, in his luxury car, felt the fatigue of the long drive, the discomfort of the hard seat. Cale, on foot, showed no sign of slowing. Finally, Cale turned into a neighborhood Arthur remembered only too well. It was the forgotten part of the old city, a place where progress had stopped decades ago. Rough, crowded, full of broken houses and restless noise. Cale walked past a block of crumbling buildings, turned into a narrow, unpaved street, and slipped through the rusted gate of a low-fenced compound. Above it, a faded, hand-painted sign read, "The Lighthouse, Shelter and Hope, All Welcome." Arthur frowned. What is this? Through the cracked window of the center, he leaned forward, watching. The compound was a beehive of quiet activity. Inside a large, repurposed warehouse, adults sat on mismatched chairs, not with notebooks, but with old clothes and sewing kits. Elderly men in patched coats, mothers with weary faces, all of them staring at one figure in the center, Cale. He wasn't dancing or performing for money. He was patiently guiding the hands of a small boy, helping him mend a tear in his shirt. He moved across the room, his smile warm, his voice patient, his eyes alive. This wasn't a beggar. This was a helper. This was something else, something more. Arthur felt a strange tightness in his chest. He stayed in the car for over an hour, unable to look away. Cale, the homeless dancer, moved around the small center with quiet authority. He repeated simple sewing instructions patiently until the children understood. When one elderly woman struggled to thread her needle, he knelt beside her, smiling. "Let me help you, Mama Dora," he whispered. The woman's face lit up with relief. That smile, Arthur had never seen a smile so genuine. When the repair session ended, Cale didn't leave. He opened the worn backpack he had carried. Inside were not fancy documents, but small bags of bread, a few cartons of milk, and some fruit. He handed them out one by one. First to the old, then to the children, then to the others. A little girl with a huge plaster on her knee hugged him and whispered, "God bless you, Cale." Arthur swallowed hard. He looked at Cale's clothes, worn, his hands calloused from the streets. His own food, barely enough. Yet he gave as though he had everything. And suddenly Arthur felt ashamed. In his mansion, he had pantries overflowing with food he never touched. Closets filled with clothes he hadn't worn in years. Rooms he never entered. And outside his gate, this boy, this homeless dancer, was feeding strangers with the little he had. No complaints, no noise, no cameras, no one clapping for him. Just love, quiet, steady, powerful love. His chest felt heavy. Not from guilt alone, but because in that moment Arthur knew something had shifted. He no longer wanted to simply know the boy's secret. He wanted to know him, all of him, and maybe, just maybe, he was ready to face something he hadn't felt in years. Admiration. Arthur didn't sleep that night. He sat in his study, staring at the flicker of the lamp beside his leather chair. The image of Cale teaching the small boy to mend his shirt, joy shining in his eyes, kept replaying in his mind. This wasn't just kindness. This was something deeper. He reached for his tablet and opened his browser. He typed in the name of the center he had seen earlier. The Lighthouse, Shelter and Hope. A plain, outdated page appeared. Free meals, clothing repairs, run by volunteers. There was a small donation link. And then he saw him, Cale, in a faded photograph, standing beside a group of children, a smile that radiated warmth. Beneath the photo, a quote, "We don't need to be rich to make a difference. We just need to care enough to try." Cale. Arthur leaned back in his chair. It felt as though the ground beneath him had shifted. He had driven past him 100 times, sat in his car while the boy performed silently, crossed paths in the street without ever asking who he was outside that corner. And yet he was building something no one noticed. He whispered into the quiet, "Why didn't you ever ask for help?" No answer, of course, only silence. But now Arthur didn't want silence. He wanted Cale's story. He wanted to understand how a boy with almost nothing could live like he had everything. And maybe, just maybe, learn how to live like that, too. The sun rose over Summit Hill, painting the walls of Arthur's mansion in warm gold. But he didn't feel the warmth. He sat at the breakfast table, untouched tea beside him, staring at the door. Lily was wheeled in by Clara, silent as usual. Arthur felt a wave of inadequacy wash over him. His failure to reach his daughter felt linked to his failure to see Cale. He knew what he had to do. He had to bridge the gap between his world and Cale's. And the only bridge he could think of was Lily. The next afternoon, Arthur dismissed Clara from the drive. He personally helped Lily into the car. He drove the usual route, passing the corner. Cale was there, dancing, the rhythm pulling a silent audience. Arthur didn't drive past. He slowed the SUV, maneuvered it to the curb, and parked. He turned off the engine. The sound of Cale's feet hitting the pavement, the faint music from his portable speaker, and the hum of city life filled the silence. Lily's eyes widened. She looked at her father, a flicker of surprise in her silent gaze. Arthur took a deep breath. "Stay here," he said softly. He got out of the car, his expensive shoes crunching on the dusty ground. He walked toward the dancing boy. His approach caused a ripple in the small crowd. They parted, recognizing the face of the billionaire. Cale saw him coming. His dance didn't stop, but the joy in his movements evaporated. His face closed off, becoming guarded, afraid. He thought the rich man had come to complain, to move him along, to call the police. Arthur stopped a few feet away. Cale's breathing was heavy from the dance. He finally stopped, his hands going instinctively to his pockets. He looked down. "Can I help you, sir?" Arthur spoke, his voice unusually quiet for the man who commanded boardrooms. "I followed you yesterday," he said. The words landed like a drop of water in still glass. Cale's body froze. He looked up, his eyes wide, afraid. "I saw the lighthouse," Arthur added. "I saw you mend the small boy's shirt. I saw you share your food. I saw everything." A long silence. Cale spoke quickly, his voice trembling. "I wasn't stealing, sir. I swear. I never took anything from your house or your car." "I know," Arthur replied gently. "I never thought you did." Cale blinked. "Then why did you follow me?" "Because I couldn't understand how someone with so little could give so much," Arthur said, echoing the words of his own style guide. "You never asked for help, Cale. Not once, not even when your shoes were nearly torn through." Cale's eyes welled up, but he didn't speak. "It's not my place, sir," he said finally, quietly. "People like me, we're taught to just manage. We stay out of the way." Arthur looked at him, something soft flickering in his eyes. "What if someone wants to help? Not because they pity you, but because they admire you?" "Why the lighthouse?" Arthur pressed. Cale finally spoke, his voice low but steady. "My little sister, Rose, she loved to dance. She was sick. We were on the streets. I danced for her to forget the pain. She passed away 3 years ago in a dirty corner, because my parents couldn't pay the medical fees. The lighthouse is for people who fall through the cracks. It's for the ones nobody sees. I danced to raise money for them. It's for people like her." Arthur swallowed hard. He hadn't expected that. And in that moment, something inside him cracked. This boy wasn't just giving. He was fighting. And somehow, without meaning to, he had shaken something deep inside him. Arthur turned slowly and walked back to the car. Cale watched him, confused. Arthur opened the passenger door, unbuckled the safety harness, and gently helped Lily's wheelchair onto the street. He wheeled her slowly, carefully, until she was positioned a few feet from Cale. Lily looked at the boy. Cale looked at the girl. "Cale," Arthur said, his voice now a little choked. "This is my daughter, Lily. She hasn't smiled or spoken in 2 years." Cale looked from the father to the daughter. He saw the cold, perfect sadness of her face. He saw her eyes, which were mirrors of his own past pain. He understood immediately. He didn't speak. He didn't offer a platitude. Instead, he did the only thing he knew how to do. He turned on his small, scratchy speaker, and the music started, a simple, rhythmic beat. Cale stepped into the center of the street. He began to dance. It wasn't the frantic, street-style dance from before. This was a slow, graceful, impossible movement. A dance of pure, contained emotion. He danced a story of loss and finding, of falling and rising. His body was fluid, an expression of the human spirit refusing to break. He danced for Lily. The crowd stood silent. Arthur stood beside his daughter, his hand resting on the back of her chair. Minutes passed, stretching into an eternity. Cale finished his dance, ending on one knee, his head bowed, his chest heaving. Silence. Lily raised a hand. It was a slow, agonizing movement. She brought her small, frail hand up, and with a sound like dry leaves rustling, she began to clap. Not a loud clap, just one soft, rhythmic clap. Then another, and another. Clap, clap, clap. The sound broke the spell. Tears streamed down Arthur Vance's face. He fell to his knees beside his daughter. "Lily," he whispered. "Lily." The other people, the street audience, burst into applause. Cale raised his head. He looked at Lily, his face wet with sweat and tears, and he gave her the genuine, unreserved smile that Arthur had first seen at the lighthouse. "Thank you, Lily," Cale whispered. And Lily, in a voice that was rusty, small, and utterly beautiful, whispered back the one word her father had been longing to hear for 2 years. "Again." The next few weeks passed like a quiet wind. Arthur was a man remade. The ice had melted. He still attended his board meetings. He still signed his contracts. But now, every afternoon at 3 o'clock, he personally drove Lily to Cale's corner. He bought Cale a clean set of clothes, new sneakers, and a meal from the finest restaurant. Cale never ate the meal. He took it back to the lighthouse and shared it. Arthur lingered by the car not as a boss, but as a student. He watched Cale's dance. He watched Lily's slow, quiet return to life. The clapping became louder. The whispers became sentences. One Thursday morning, Arthur walked into his study and saw a thin, white envelope waiting for him. It was a letter from Cale. Arthur picked it up, his hands surprisingly unsteady. Cale had asked for a meeting, not on the street, but at the lighthouse. Arthur drove there alone that evening. The lighthouse was glowing with a gentle warmth. Cale was inside, sweeping the floor, not for money, but to create a home without walls. Arthur walked in. Cale stopped sweeping, his face serious. "Thank you for coming, sir," he said. "I'm not going to dance on the corner anymore." Arthur straightened. "Why?" He felt a cold dread return. "Did someone threaten you? I can stop them. I can buy you a safe place." "No, sir," Cale said quietly. "It's because of what you made me believe I could do." He held up a thick, worn notebook. "I'm going to school. I'm completing my high school diploma at night. I want to build something bigger. Not just a corner where I dance for change, but a center where I teach my art. A place where children like Rose, children who are in pain, can find a voice through movement. A place that restores pride. A place where nobody feels stupid or forgotten." He looked at Arthur, his eyes steady. "I want to do more than dance, sir. I want to lead." Arthur stared at him. The boy's ambition was pure, and it was immense. "So, what do you want to do?" Arthur asked. "I want to build a center," Cale said. "A place with wooden floors, not concrete. A place with proper teachers, not just me. But I want to build it slowly, stone by stone, dance by dance. I don't want to be rescued, sir. I want to be capable. I've built the lighthouse slowly. I want to build the new one, too." Arthur nodded slowly. "You have the vision," he said. "I have the resources." Cale blinked. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe we don't have to do this separately." Silence. Then a soft smile crept across Cale's face. And for the first time, Arthur saw it. Not the homeless boy, not the dancer, but the leader. The next 2 months were a whirlwind of quiet, respectful partnership. Arthur didn't simply write a check. He insisted Cale lead the project. He didn't want Cale to be swallowed by his wealth. He wanted Cale to still recognize himself inside the dream. Arthur brought in his architects, but Cale vetoed the first 3 designs: too cold, too corporate, too much glass. Cale wanted warmth, wood, and light. Arthur listened. He listened like a man hearing his own conscience for the first time. The location was eventually chosen. A plot of land near the lighthouse. The groundbreaking was small, private, and deeply personal. Arthur, Cale, and Lily, no longer silent, watched the small ceremony with an intense, quiet focus. Her chair was not a prison, but a throne of her quiet return to life. Arthur finally understood. He had spent his life building empires of steel and paper. Cale built empires of hope and movement. One Friday, Arthur called Cale to the mansion. Cale walked into the opulent drawing room, still slightly intimidated by the sheer scale of the wealth, but no longer afraid. Arthur was sitting by the grand piano, a place he never used. He held a rolled certificate. "I'd like to offer you something else, Cale," Arthur said. Cale unrolled it slowly, his breath caught. "Partnership. The Rose Dance and Arts Foundation. Director of Arts and Movement. Cale." Arthur's entire foundation was behind it. Full funding. He looked up, stunned. Arthur's voice was steady. "I want to expand this all across the country with your heart and my resources. I want to do it the right way with you leading it." Cale's lips parted, but no words came. Arthur stepped closer. "This isn't charity. This is purpose. And I want to walk beside you." Cale's voice cracked. "Are you sure?" Arthur smiled. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. He added, softer still. Also, I'd like to invite you and your friends from the lighthouse to a special dinner. Not as my project, but as my guests. As a man who sees you. Tears finally rolled down Cale's cheeks. I'd like that, he whispered. The new center, built with Cale's vision and Arthur's resources, was called the Rose Dance and Arts Sanctuary. It was a masterpiece of thoughtful design. Warm wooden floors, high ceilings, walls of glass that let the light flood in. It was a place of healing, for the body and the soul. The opening night was not a corporate affair. It was a celebration of community. The children from the lighthouse were there, the elderly men and women, all dressed in their best, smiling and laughing. Lily, no longer confined to her chair, but actively volunteering, managed the guest list. She greeted people with a confident, strong voice. Cale, elegant and sure in a new suit, stood beside Arthur. The host, a young woman Cale had taught at the lighthouse, stepped forward. We would now like to invite our founder, our light, Cale. The room erupted in cheers. Cale stepped forward, microphone in hand. I used to think people like me only clean streets, he began. But someone showed me that even the homeless can lead movements, that our small stories matter. His gaze found Arthur's. And to the man who saw me, even when I didn't see myself. Thank you. Arthur felt a lump rise in his throat. He clapped, not as a businessman, not as a patron, but as a man whose heart was moved. This wasn't just Cale's victory. It was theirs. As they stood under the new sign, which proudly read, The Rose Dance and Arts Sanctuary, co-founded by Arthur Vance and Cale, Lily wheeled over to her father. She reached up and touched his hand. Daddy, she said, a simple word filled with 2 years of silent emotion. He made me want to dance again. Arthur looked at his daughter, then at Cale, and finally he understood the true measure of success. It was not in the billions he had amassed, but in the life he had helped restore, the voice he had helped find. I used to think people like me only built towers of finance, Arthur whispered to Cale, smiling. Cale returned the smile. Now people like you build foundations of joy. And together they walked back inside. The story that began with suspicion ended with purpose, partnership, and a love deeper than words. Sometimes you don't need to have it all to make a difference. Cale was just a homeless boy, yet his little became much, reminding us that true greatness is not measured by wealth or status, but by the kindness we show and the sacrifices we make for others.